So here we are again. It's another Microsoft Ignite. I'm here with Bob Kelly. Last year we talked with him a whole 1 week into his job at Flexera. And so, yeah, I guess now we get to get a little bit more out of you as to what you've been up to now that you're settled in and working away at your new position with Flexera.
Sure. Yeah. It's the 1 year check-in. So it's been a good year. I've been really happy with how things have been going. When I came on, it was to do Admin Studio, and then I quickly got Software Vulnerability Management kind of added to my to-do list very quickly through departure of my predecessor. So it's been good, and I see the good thing is I see a lot of synergy and connection between the two. I mean, they really do kind of target the same person. On the software vulnerability management side, it's what's out there that needs to be updated, and what are the criticality of those vulnerabilities so that you can do some prioritization, helping actually deploy those updates through WSUS and SCCM. So if we kind of take that as the management of the security side, then connected very closely to that naturally is you need packages. And that's what Admin Studio is naturally all about. So I think there's a really good connection. It's been easy for me to get on board with the software vulnerability manager piece because of the close relationship between the two, between the people that are buying it, using it, and the workflows that they're trying to execute.
Yeah, so I was familiar with Secunia when they had when they were a separate company and they had their vulnerability assessment tool, which was actually quite thorough. So I always liked that. And so yeah, you're working towards, sort of making it more of a holistic approach with the two products. Is that what's kind of going on?
Yeah, I think it's natural anyway, but it's even more so because I run both products that they get connected a little better. So at the end of this year, the Admin Studio update we'll be releasing in the October-November timeframe is going to have some integration with Software Vulnerability Manager where you'll be able to see the packages in your environment that have been assessed as vulnerable versions of software that need to be patched, so that from an Admin Studio packager standpoint, you can kind of see here's something you need to go take care of, and the criticality, again, so you can prioritize it. But without having to go leave one product or look at a report, you can kind of get a task list. Because Admin Studio, of course, doesn't have an agent of its own to know what's in your environment. So this kind of completes that picture.
Okay, cool. So you see further integration where it's going to be kind of that, I guess you could say, simplifying the workflow between the two worlds of the security analysis and the packaging.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
And one of the first things we did was add a new module to Admin Studio called Empress Module, which allows you to use our Secunia research on the back end through the APIs we created for that product in order to, instead of examining your workstation and seeing what vulnerable software is installed, we're actually looking at your packages. So Admin Studio has this application catalog with all the files and the data we need to generate all those valuable reports. We can also look at that same data and say, of your 100 applications or 500 applications, how many have known vulnerabilities, so that you can hopefully get on top of that and again, know what work you need to do and how to prioritize it within the product versus external pressure to here's your number one, here's your number one, try to get in front of it. Yeah,
well, and that's something that's always been challenging when you look at software vulnerability is how to prioritize it. I've been in enough enterprises to know there's all sorts of challenges with third-party software. A, understanding which components are vulnerable, and then B, just managing it. Some companies just don't get around to managing it at all.
Yeah. And what we see is a lot of people focus on, the top 5, top 10 big vendors, and they pat themselves on the back for getting those patched within 30 days. But meanwhile, our numbers show 50% of the vulnerabilities that are out there, are not those big, Mozilla and Java and Microsoft. If you only focus on those, you're really leaving yourself open, because the bad guys know that those 10 applications are the ones that everybody's patching. So their window to attack there is a lot smaller than some application that is probably flying under the radar, because you can't possibly stay on top of what is every update for every product.
Yeah, and I've seen some sessions this week talking about the various attacks that hackers are using, and with polymorphic code and just how they're being very creative with using all sorts of unique attacks every single time. It's just doing something that's a known path to exploiting your environment is just not good enough. You have to really cover all your bases, because they are fishing for that one thing that's going to get them in.
Right. And I think we see, so one thing that's come up recently is SCUP kind of got added to SCCM recently.
Yeah.
And so
that re-added.
Re-added, yeah. I mean, it was the number one request in user voice forever, right? People wanted it.
Yeah.
But now that it's there, there's a lot of people looking at it for the first time, even though it's been around since, I think, 2011. There it is. Oh, okay, so I need the SCUP catalog. Mm-hmm. Where are these SCUP catalogs? So we're getting asked, hey, can we consume the patches that you provide as a SCUP catalog?
Yeah.
And no, we really don't want to do that, because it takes away all the value of being able to see what is the priority, mm-hmm. and what is the whole picture of your environment. Because if you have a SCUP catalog with 100 applications in it, what you're going to see is your patch, remediation level, how well you're doing is compared against those known 100 applications. Mm-hmm. So the idea that we have 20,000 applications that we can tell you about is where the real value is. And so distilling that down to a catalog immediately takes away a lot of the value. So mm-hmm. I try to point out, it's great. I'm a packaging guy, so mm-hmm. Not having a package, if I could just buy a catalog or get my hands on a SCUP catalog, those are packages I don't have to make. But I've heard a million horror stories where it's just another thing that you have to troubleshoot. Now you didn't build it, and you can't customize it in SCUP, and so there's all kinds of limitations. But then that's always going to be, no matter if you bought the biggest SCUP catalog in the world and a new company came out and did an amazing number of applications, it's still going to probably only be a small fraction of the applications that you actually need to create packages for.
Yeah.
So something like Admin Studio is always going to be there to fill that remaining gap. You just can't get out the packaging.
Yeah. It's nice that you can get these catalogs to reduce the burden of patching, but it doesn't really provide that comprehensive coverage you need.
Yeah. It's a new set of problems to deal with, really.
Yeah, and if you're dealing with application virtualization or MSIX containers, SCUP's not going to fix that for you.
Right. Yeah. And MSIX, that's the big topic here this week. I know that's all the sessions that I'm focused on making sure I get myself into. We've been working with Microsoft for a while. We were quick to get some support into Admin Studio right away. I think back in March we had our first 2018 release, and we were able to get some MSIX suitability scans in there. So we have that catalog I said we run all these reports against. We can tell you about Java dependencies and application compatibility and all this stuff. When we already had something for like AppV mm-hmm. compatibility or suitability. Will it work? Red? No, this one's just not going to work. Yellow, orange. Yeah, you might have to do something or test this a little extra, and then green. Go ahead and automate it. We can batch convert to AppV as well. But then, for ThinApp and for Citrix and the other formats as well, those same rules that we kind of built lended themselves very well to MSIX. So we can see, okay, MSIX, we know they can't handle, things like system services and device drivers. So we can, again, look in your package and tell you, here's where you're going to have to probably focus to get where you want to be if MSIX is your goal.
Yeah, MSIX, based on the roadmap they were talking about yesterday, it seems like it's a rapidly evolving story, and those rules are going to be forever changing. And I'm sure there's going to be some very keen packagers that'll stay on top of it, but when you have like the commodity type, well, maybe commodity is the wrong word, but you look at some of the staff that has to do packaging, it's not their full-time job.
Yeah.
How do they keep on top of this, and how do they know what in their portfolio can and can't be virtualized as time passes on? So I see this as a huge win for them if they can actually have an assessment tool that can look at this stuff, because, you know, what were they saying? They were looking at feature updates every 3 months and fixes even more quickly, ad hoc. So
it's promising.
It's promising, but at the same time, you know, you have to be on top of it to really take advantage of what's going on there.
Right. Yeah. And that's two things too, right? So MSIX itself, that technology is part of Windows. So that'll be updated on the Windows schedule.
Yeah.
What we've been hearing a lot about is their packaging tool.
Yes.
You know, that's in the Windows or Microsoft Store.
Yeah.
So they aren't restricted to that update cadence, and they can do things quickly, which is cool. I mean, it's what everybody wants. But you know, I immediately got questions like, "Oh no, Microsoft's doing a repackager. Are you worried?" And not even a little bit, because not because they couldn't do a good packager. They, for most things, I think even Microsoft would admit they get a solid C is kind of what they're going for, and they rely on their third-party ecosystem and partners to come up with the B and A list material that people can consume. So, but I for one love the fact that repackaging is a topic again.
Yes, yes.
I mean, there is a repackager. One of the big benefits of MSIX is you don't have to repackage as much, but the conversation's all repackage.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the coolest of the things that I think MSIX is going to get us is the ability to repackage less. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean the customization or the modification packages, they call them. Mm-hmm. Unlike a transform file where you have the changes being made to the installation as it happens, and you end up with what you wanted. In this case, it's really a completely separate package that are married together.
Yeah. So
it's an overlay at runtime, and that means that connection isn't explicit.
Yeah.
Where with the transform file, you'd have to create a new transform file every time you had a new MSI because of that relationship. With AppX, it's going to be or MSIX. I keep confusing the two by name. MSIX, we've got the relationship is less a GUID and more, this is the vendor and the title and the file versions, and that's how they're looking at it, which makes it far more dynamic in terms of being able to get a new version of an application and keep your old modification package in place and have it continue to work.
It's interesting to see how they've kind of taken a more mature approach to how we're going to be able to modify packages, and it's the funny thing, like what was it? I think it was 2002. I was told packaging's on its way out. Everything's going to be a web app, and here we are. And there's more web apps. I'll admit that, but there's still a lot of local apps because local execution for certain things is king. You can't really get away from that. So we do need this container technology to. Do I love AppV, but it's still. I know MSIX will have its warts too, but it needs to mature and it has to change. So I'm excited to see how this container technology is going to provide that application OS isolation from the OS, so you can have that install with no regrets type experience.
Right. It's funny to see that being pushed as the biggest benefit of MSIX. A clean uninstall, really?
Yeah.
We really mean it. When you remove this application, it will not be there anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny that's a selling point for some new technology.
Yeah, well, like back in the SoftGrid days, that was the big selling point of SoftGrid. And then, Microsoft bought it up. And It does, for the most part, do what it's supposed to do, but apparently it didn't quite make the grade, and they said, nope, we're going to consolidate all this on MSIX.
Yeah. Well, and I think the way this has a better shot than AppV did is it's being pushed on the ISVs. So if we start getting AppV was never an option for a software vendor to deliver their product. It was way too restricted. And then AppX came along, and okay, we're closer, but now it's got all this other baggage that I don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
Very restrictive. So, I think the best way they tell the story is they're trying to take the best of MSI and ClickOnce and AppX and AppV and learn from that and have one kind of format that learned from the past and delivers. And if if they are successful in getting the ISVs to buy into, this is the way I want to distribute my software and update my software, this is the installation from the web experience that I want, and they make it easy, then I think we start, as IT pros, just start getting MSIX packages in the relatively near future. And from there, we'll start get comfortable with the tools around it. And if it's true that it's easier to manage, easier to maintain, then it's going to find its way.
Yeah, this is going to be a critical piece. Is the vendors, like, people talk about success with repackaging, but this also applies to the ISVs, because I think one of the downfalls of AppX was just the fact that there was so much rework of the source code that would be needed to make the app work. And you have this package support framework, which seems to be the magic unicorn that's going to fix your problems.
We'll see.
Yeah. And so that's where I'm really wondering where that's going to go, because when I talk to people, it seems to always come back to the package support framework. And Microsoft in their session said, that we're going to actively develop on that and build some of that. Yeah. But they also want ISVs and community contributing to that. So we have the GitHub repository. They did acknowledge that there's some issues contributing to the GitHub repository today, but
Tim's trying,
yeah. Tim Megan is on his way to making contributions, so he's active in there too. So yeah. I think it holds a lot of promise, and I was really shocked, when they mentioned like some of these support. Like I thought it was just strictly getting your app into the container, these fixes, and then they suggested, well, maybe there'll be a module that translates NTLM authentication to modern authentication for your app. And I'm like, whoa, like for modern management, that's a huge thing, if you can get some of these apps, changing their authentication mechanism so you can decommission, NTLM, Kerberos, that whole world.
Yeah, and you think about, you get in trouble for repackaging a vendor application and then running into trouble. Well, I wrote this fix up that is changing your whole authentication system. It's not working. I want support.
Yeah. It's going to be a different world with what we're doing with these containers, and it's both exciting, and I guess it's a little bit scary from the ISV standpoint, because if you thought packagers did evil things before, well, you could be surprised at what they're going to do now with the package support framework. So
I was a little disappointed to learn that the package support framework is really more of a developer play. So it's not like you take your tweaks to a package and you can share them with other IT pros. It really is more about changing the behavior of the program to work in a redirected fashion. So the good example that they shared was, in a containerized application, the files aren't where the system thinks they are. So if you're doing a relative path, like get the XML file from the directory where the exe is type of thing, it's not going to be there. And so that needs a support framework fix-up to change the path so that it sees what the file where it really is, and it can open it the way it expects to. So it is really just about getting things to work in a container versus the modification package, or really the IT pro piece versus the developer piece.
Yeah, Tim did mention when I talked to him about just how, AppV handles a lot of this stuff for you. And with MSIX, now we have to look at, okay, how are we going to code in these different file and registry calls to make the app work in the container? And, I'm speculating that maybe the ISVs are going to have to step up to make this easy for the IT pro, because if it's too technical, people aren't going to use it.
Yeah.
I love application compatibility shims, but they're even too technical for most people to implement.
True.
And so, yeah, I see opportunity, and we'll see how it all pans out as time goes on. But, that's, I think, going to be the key to MSIX getting that IT pro adoption, is people making it easy for them.
Yeah, right. Which I feel is a responsibility of mine now, in a way, because if we can make the tools really enable MSIX and make things easier. So, a transform file, is a perfect example of something that's way more complicated than anyone hopes it will be. Okay, I want to turn off automatic updates when I deploy this application, but I can't repackage the MSI. So I have to do it in a transform. Now I got to figure out, is it a registry change? Is it a XML file change? Like, what's happening? And then figure that out, and then get it into a transform file, and then change that transform file every time there's a new version. All of that is just painful. So if that scenario can be made a lot easier by MSIX, and the tools allow you to just do what you want to do, or just apply what you want to apply, then I think, it definitely helps the case.
Yeah, so when we look at these containers, what really shocked me in the presentation was how they were talking about, I guess, the different levels of container. Going from Windows Defender Application Guard, where you have Hyper-V essentially doing a very rigid container using hardware virtualization, down to almost what they suggest might be available for Windows 7 and Windows 8, which is a almost container-less solution, where it's essentially installing to the operating system.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
I think it's a good approach. If we can poke holes in the container, it looks like that's supported today, where in the manifest you can actually say, this is something outside the package that I'm going to be touching, and then it allows you to do so. But just dialing back, or like turning off containerization, doesn't seem to be a possibility. I think when they talked about kind of dialing down the containerization aspect of MSIX, it went all the way down to file and registry redirection, which to most of us is containerization. Yeah, that's like FinApp. That's all it does. Yeah. So it's dialing it down to what we already think of as containerization. So what they talked about was maybe in the future having an even lower setting that opened it up more. But it sounds like right now you can explicitly specify things, but it can't just be accessible. Like middleware, for example, you wouldn't do Java and then turn containerization all the way down, and then it's just there for all the applications to talk to. There's more work involved.
Yeah, I think we have to wait for more information on how they want to approach Windows 7 and Windows 8. I'm personally a Windows 10 converted fan, and
I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, and so for me, I'm just like, why bother? But I guess they do have something pulling them in that direction to do it. Yeah. So we'll have to see how that all pans out. But it'll be.
They see the real numbers. They know. They know how many 7 really are out there.
Yeah, they have the telemetry. We don't, so we don't know for sure what's lurking out there. We did see the extended support announcements, so I guess there might be a problem that, yeah.
Yeah.
So Other than that, I think it's interesting that they're building more operating system extensions. That's going to make the story better for applications converting in. We got the NT services, and then even they talked a bit about device drivers, which was kind of funny.
Yeah. I mean, and I like the approach makes sense because you're not going to bend this technology to handle device drivers. It just simply isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So it really is a mindset. They turn around and they're like, well, do you really want to do that?
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, nobody wants to do that. These are all things that we have to do.
Yeah.
So I think the mindset they want to try to get adopted is that drivers and the software that supports the drivers should be two separate things.
Yeah.
And the software can be MSIX, but the drivers really need to be handled by Windows Update.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. Like they're going to have to sort out how they deal with it because, I see the specialized software in different industries. Like it's in oil and gas. It's the software that's hooked up to a $20,000 pump. It's in healthcare. It's the software hooked up to the I don't know how expensive MRI machine.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deliver your software when it needs those drivers? So,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't be on the IT pro to figure out the separation.
No.
And so I know they're pushing, and everywhere they can to try to fix this kind of mentality that, just throw them together and let people figure it out isn't working so well.
No, it needs better guidance. Like, with MSIX, we had diffix, and maybe diffix still plays a role with MSIX. But we need ways to get those drivers out the door successfully. So it'll be interesting to see what evolution happens, because it sounds like they want to try to make it a better story than it is today. So
yeah, it's good they're taking ownership of things aren't very good. We haven't done anything to help this situation in a very long time. 10 years or something since AppV, or so
yeah.
It's good to see them stepping up and saying, okay, this is a problem, we're going to tackle it head on, and we've got the technologies that we built over time. We've learned a lot. We know maybe how it could work best. And things like the package support framework, definitely didn't come out of thin air. They must know that there's a lot of reuse needed. There's a lot of common problems that everybody's not going to want to solve.
Yeah.
So the idea of putting that all on GitHub and having it shared out, I think, could be really good. And then tools like Admin Studio could make it easier for you to pick what's applicable to your package from GitHub and just turn it on instead of having to go, okay, this isn't working. So how does that translate to some fix up in GitHub somewhere? That's not, GitHub is not an IT pro, interface or service that most people spend much time with these days. And when I talked to the Microsoft about it, they weren't sure if that was the right place or not because of that.
Yeah, I can understand it. I think, personally, from my point of view, IT pros should learn the basics of GitHub. I'm already using it to manage, my scripts and packages.
Yeah.
I think it's a cool idea. Like, you can get the version control, and, you have a repository that you can use with teams anywhere in the world. And so I think there's possibilities. But, obviously, it's the DevOps guys and the heavy-duty coders that are the first in, but I really think packagers and IT pros should consider it for some things, and that's my opinion. But I do get it. Like, when you first approach it, you're just kind of like, whoa, this is completely different.
Yeah.
But
I'm dipping my toe in another world.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how even PowerShell was for a lot of people, right? Like,
yeah.
I understand batch, VB script, kickstart, those are pretty easy to wrap your head around. And then it's like, oh, well, there's PowerShell. I'm like, oh, let me see PowerShell. Looks like C# code. Everything's object oriented, and I mean, it's come a long way. I think it's much more consumable. But that kind of leap that as technology advances, the IT pros being pulled, I think, more and more into the developer mentality about how to get things done.
Yeah, I personally think you have to be able to script. like writes a PowerShell and understand it. And personally, from having to deal with VBScript and MSI, I would never want to go back to that. I forced myself to use PowerShell, and after I started using it a little bit, I'm like, hey, once you understand PowerShell, things are actually easier.
Yeah.
You can get more done with less code.
Yeah. Yeah, I try to describe it as just the most killer command line tool you ever saw.
Yeah.
Because scripts are intimidating, but you do command lines all the time. You've done them for years, and
yeah.
If you kind of look at it just that way, you can get quite a bit done. And the power's pretty amazing.
Yeah, all the commandlets, it's so extensible, and it's always expanding. You'll just find out, you go to the PowerShell gallery and you're like, oh, there's a commandlet for this now, and wow, my life just got even easier.
Yeah. There's commandlets for Admin Studio. You can actually control everything Admin Studio does with commandlets.
Wow.
And I'm like, how long has it done this? I've never seen this anywhere. Like, our customers don't know about it either. Like, okay, let's fix that.
Yeah, I think it's important to, for vendors to showcase their automation interfaces, because, if you expose it, you'll be surprised what some customers do to make their lives easier.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to some enablement. So it's on us, and I've made it a priority. We're going to do a session at the App Manage event next month. Hopefully we'll be recording it, but in either case, the scripts that we create will be made available. And the idea is to automate the whole process of repackaging and detection and getting into the catalog, getting it out to distribution. All of that can be automated through the system. And, just telling you that it's possible is interesting, but not necessarily actionable.
Yeah.
So, to describe exactly what you could do and provide scripts that do it is going to make it far more consumable and easy to take advantage of.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been great. We had a great session here, and, I look forward to talking to you again. I hope you come to Ignite next year and we can follow up with you. Before we close off, is there anything else you'd like to talk about with what you're doing at Flexera?
So the October release, one thing we're doing that I think you might find interesting is suggesting vendor command line, silent command lines. So if you take whatever application and pull it into the catalog, it will be examined, and the silent command lines for installation and uninstall will be suggested to you.
Oh, wow.
And then we're doing a wrapper along with that. So we already use the PowerShell app deployment toolkit to wrap for PowerShell, and it can leverage these command lines. We can also now, and a lot of people have gotten excited about this, we're doing EXE wrapping. So you can wrap your package in an EXE. So you say, well, how helpful is that? You can't customize an EXE. You can with Wise Script Editor.
Oh.
So I'm going to put Wise Script Editor into the Admin Studio suite, and we'll use that for wrapping. So you can wrap it with PowerShell, or you can wrap it with Wise Script Editor. In either case, you can have a template, and they're easy to customize if you know PowerShell. And if you don't, the Wise Script Editor is a very simple point-and-click interface. And I put a customer advisory board together, and talking to them about wrapping and what we want to do, and how I want to make Admin Studio more part of the entire application readiness conversation, and not just repackaging and customization, but leveraging vendor setups is the most common thing that people are doing, and we need to have a better story there. So that's where this wrapping's coming from. The command line suggestions are coming from. And I found out that half the guys on the board all were wrapping with Wise Script Editor. They're still using it. And I was really in a position where we either need to end of life Wise Script Editor or do something with it. And one of those is going to happen in the next couple of months. And luckily we found a good use, a very applicable solution.
Yeah, like the Wise Script, I dealt with it back in the early days when, in the late 90s, and
you do all kinds of stuff with it.
Yeah, it's not that bad. It's and a lot of packagers still refuse to move away from it because it just does what they need.
Some customers have 20,000 scripts.
Ooh.
I'm like, oh my gosh. So they're excited. They're like, oh, I thought we were going to have to move to PowerShell.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, don't make me the guy who made you not learn PowerShell. That's not the legacy I want. So still do PowerShell, but for your wrapping, you don't have to change 20,000 packages.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you could get a bit of notoriety being the guy that refused to kill YScript, and it just kept living.
Yeah.
Well, I still think it has a place because as much as I want people to use PowerShell and be PowerShell experts, I do touch what I consider small clients, which are 600 to 800 people, and their IT admins barely are keeping the lights on. They run so lean,
right?
And they just need something to get stuff out the door.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's have the tools in your toolbox and pull out the right one at the right time.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Next year, hopefully see you again and we can have some more chat and fun and see what's going on.
Definitely. Look forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks.